WOVU LP, Cleveland.
This is Open Door with Vince Robinson. In-depth conversations with people who are making a difference in the lives of others here and around the world. Culture is at the heart of who you are. Know your culture, find yourself on Open Door with Vince Robinson.
Welcome to Open Door. I'm Vince Robinson, and my guest is India Nicole Burton. Now, I'm going to start off by apologizing to you because I wrote an article and I called you India Pierce, and there is an India Pierce, but she's in a completely different lane, and she's a lot older than you.
Oh, so that's okay. Thank you, though.
Yeah, but,
I appreciate it.
I saw your play, Panther Women, and I was extremely impressed, and I just thought I'd take it upon myself to give you an opportunity to tell your story. That's what we do on Open Door.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it, and I'm glad to be here.
Okay. So as we have this conversation, we are in the Larchmere Arts Recording Studio. We're looking out the window and seeing all the traffic, and we are in a place that is a cultural space. It is a space that has been reserved for the ancestors to carry out their wishes. So I humbly welcome you to Larchmere Arts, as well as Open Door Cleveland. As we have this interview, your play is about to close. There are just a few more performances, but by the time this airs, it will be history as opposed to something that is happening in the future.
Yeah.
But why don't we talk about this fantastic play that you have written? What was the inspiration for it?
Wow. So I had always been able to operate in spaces as a Black woman around a large number of white individuals, and they always accepted me, or I thought that they accepted me, you know. And they're now looking back at it, there was a lot of like microaggressions happening, and I just was too young, or, you know, too naive to recognize it. So me and my partner in 2016, we went to the Cavs when the Cavs won the championship. So we went downtown to the huge parade that I don't think anyone knew that it was going to be 1 million people there, you know. So when we got there, some people had been there since like 6, and we got there at like 1. And when we got there, there was everywhere we stopped. No one they wanted us to move along because they had been there all day. So we stopped in front of these individuals, and they started harassing us, and one of them pushed my partner, and I'm trying to defend my partner, and I'm really upset. So one of the white guys looked at me, he said, "Why do you always have to be so difficult, just like Black women?" And for me, I had never, you know what I mean? I had never faced that kind of overt racism or misogyny. And I was very angry, and I went home and I started to watch YouTube. I started to watch the Nation of Islam videos because I was so angry and I needed somewhere to put this rage. And then all of a sudden, the Black Panthers were, of course, cute because they're a black. They were a black. I hate to say nationalist group, but they were, you know. And I started seeing these women, you know, and I know everybody knows who Angela Davis is. Angela Davis is kind of the quintessential woman that everybody thinks about when they think of the Black liberation movement. And I started seeing all these women. I saw Kathleen Cleaver, and I'm like, I need to really investigate who these women are. And I started reading all of their autobiographies, and I became really enamored by them. And I also felt closer to the ancestors because I had always been operating in these spaces that were so Eurocentric. And, you know, in college, I went to college for theater, and we learned about Stanislavski and Grotowski and, you know, Isbin and all of these different European artists. But, you know, and the one that they talk about a lot is August Wilson. I mean, that's the one, in Lorraine Hansberry, because they have the most popular plays. But they never talked about Adrienne Kennedy, you know, or, you know, people like that, Amiri Baraka, people who were a part of the Black Arts movement. James Baldwin, all of those people. Ntozake Shange came a little bit later. But anyway, so Cleveland Public Theater, I work there now, but then I didn't. They do a lot of new play development series, and one of them is called Entry Point. So at this time, they asked me to come in and be a facilitator. And as I was walking around this space, I saw all these Black women, and I saw their presence and how strong it was. So I went around and I started talking to all the Black women, writers, dancers, theater administrators, and I'm like, I have this idea. If I do this, would you guys be interested? And of course, all of them said, yeah, they were really interested in it. And then I went to Raymond and I said, I have Raymond Bobgin, who was the executive artistic director of Cleveland Public Theater. And I said, I have this idea. And he said, yeah, let's talk about it. And a couple months later, he asked me to apply for this national fellowship that I never thought I was going to get. And then I got it, so I had to do something. So we were like, why don't we do Panther Women? So I gathered a group of about 12 women into my small apartment in Lakewood, and we started to talk about ideas. And a few weeks later, we were given some space, and we started to work, and that is how all of it came to be. And that was 3 years ago in 2018, and now we're here.
So you mentioned 12 women, and I watched the play, and as a photographer, I take notice of a lot of things. And one of the things that I noticed about the way this play was cast was just the diversity of the cast members. I mean, they're all shades, they're all shapes, they're all textures. It was really, it was. I'm struggling to find the words to describe it, but it was just so reflective of the diversity of our race. And I just wondered if there was any intentionality on your part.
Oh, yeah. I mean, when people come audition, I typically just look for who's best. But as an African-American woman, it's also very important for me to represent the wide range of women that exist within our culture. And the colors, the sizes and shapes and things like that. And I really believe that those women on stage together are just beautiful. I mean, just to see different shades, high yellow, beautiful dark skin, brown skin, for me, that is important to represent all of who we are, and especially sizes, for me, because the theater community is, they are racist, but they're also sizist, and a lot of African American women and, women in general who are larger don't get a lot of representation or roles, or if they
get a stereotypical
exactly
role.
So it was very, very important for me to make sure that I represented all aspects of beauty. Beauty is in larger women. Beauty is in light-skinned, dark-skinned women. And all of those women on that stage are absolutely gorgeous to me. So, and that's not why I cast them because they're gorgeous. They just, they all earn the part, but they are all absolutely gorgeous and extremely talented. So
another thing that I really appreciated about that performance was the choreography.
Yeah.
I shoot plays. So because I shoot plays, I noticed how things get moved around. I pay specific attention to movement because I'm following the movement. And there were a few things that I noticed that I didn't write about, but one was the scarf.
Oh, yeah.
The scarf was like, I'm just watching it going through all these different changes, wrapped around the waist, wrapped around the neck, over the head, all those different things. I saw the fans pulled out.
Yes.
So there were just, and then the way the steps were moved. I mean, that whole performance to me was just magical.
Oh, thank you.
But then there was also the fact that it was a one act. And you took us into so many different places and so many different scenes with the same basic layout as far as the stage was concerned. And I'll be honest with you, because I was following it as a photographer at times and not necessarily as a patron. Some things missed me, but then there were things that really grabbed my attention. You know, one of the ways that you use provocative language in that play, it was just so impressive, because those were the moments that really caught the audience's attention. And you know, you always wonder, are they going to respond to this or respond to that? So you hear the laughter, you hear the grunts, you hear the responses, and you were there, so you saw it happening. What was that like for you?
I mean, it's really, because some nights because I go to all the performances, because this is a workshop. So the world premiere won't happen until 2022 at Cleveland Public Theater. So I still got to do a couple rewrites. But when I started writing this piece, I wanted, because I am a huge Toni Morrison fan. Toni Morrison is a goddess to me. And one of the things that I love about Toni Morrison is that she specifically did not write for the white gaze. And that is so important in my work. Is like, I'm going to say what I want to say. And if people don't like it, then that's just it. So it was really important for me to also explore sexuality and explore rage, because those are the things that, ironically, Black women are put in a box as that sort of makes us unhuman, but our sexuality and our emotion and human emotion is humanity. You know what I mean? Sexuality is a part of our humanity. So it was important for me to lean into those, because this play is all about humanizing the three women, Assata Shakur, Angela Davis, and Elaine Brown, but also humanizing Black women. You know, we are so often objectified, you know, big butts, big boobs. Yes, I own I don't know if I can say that, but in there, I own my body, and they need liberated too. Like they say that. The rage, you know, you have a right to be rageful, you know, and that's what the dance is for, is to get that rage out. And then at the end of the dance, we say, yes, but this rage is going to devour us. So we got to figure out a way to not walk around all the time rageful, and that's extremely hard. But every night, the way people respond to it, sometimes people laugh, sometimes people, I think, are appalled, but like appalled in a way that's inward instead of outward, you know, because I think that a lot of people make a lot of self-discovery by watching these women on stage. I had a lot, not that I care what white men think about the show, but I've had like a number of white men come up to me. One of them was crying and said that, you know, this is really, this makes me think about my privilege a lot and how I show up in the world. So, yeah.
Very profound. You're listening to Open Door with Vince Robinson. My guest is India Nicole Burton, and she has written a fantastic play called Panther Women, which you have just shared with me is going to be shown at Cleveland Public Theater in 2022.
Yes.
So the current version is a workshop, but it's going to be developed, and so you're going to have the benefit of the whole stage and the indoor performance.
Lights and all that, yep.
Yeah, so I'm definitely going to have to be in the house when that happens. And
yes.
I'm just going to go ahead and preemptively put my bid in. I want to shoot your play. You need to have a Black male photographer shooting your play on that night. So we just gonna put that out there. But in the meantime,
yes,
self-plug,
please come
you know,
see it.
Yeah, it is what it is. But I just love doing that. But I want to explore the play a little bit more, because there are some other ideas that I want to convey, and we will get to those when we return. You're listening to Open Door Cleveland with Vince Robinson and my guest India Nicole Burton on 95.9 FM WOVU. Burton Bell Car Community Radio Station. We'll be right back after these messages.
Are you or someone you know in need of help? Here's a resource you can turn to.
The Thea Bowman Center has been serving the community for over 50 years and provides services to help support Mount Pleasant and surrounding communities of all ages. Some of these programs include adult education like GED, computer classes, food pantry, senior outreach, youth after school, and summer programs, and much more. Are you a Cleveland resident in need of a GED preparation, a food pantry, youth or senior programs? Then call the Thea Bowman Center at 216 216-491-0669 or visit TheaBowmanCenter.org. Call the Thea Bowman Center at 216-491-0669 or visit TheaBowmanCenter.org to register today.
This message is brought to you by the Thea Bowman Center and WOVU 95.9 FM, Our Voices United, a Burton Bell Carr community radio station.
This is Vince Robinson inviting you to visit Cleveland's Museum of Contemporary Art to witness a solo exhibition by my artist friend and guest of Open Door, Aaron Williams. It's called Awful Aaron and opens this Friday at MoCA from 6 to 11 p.m. Visit mocacleveland.org for more. Now, back to Open Door with Vince Robinson. We're back on Open Door with Vince Robinson and my guest, India Nicole Burton. I'm loving that name now that I got it down. India Nicole Burton.
Thank you.
Written this fantastic play. It's called Panther Women. You won't be able to see it now, but you'll be able to see it later. Mm-hmm. And when you see it again, it will be the new and improved version. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm hoping that one of those actresses will be around for the next iteration of it, because she has a very special place in my heart. Mm-hmm. Her name is Kimmy.
Yes,
that's
my Saladin. Yes, that's my girl.
That's my girl. I saw her. I witnessed her very first play. Mm-hmm. She was in The Wizard of Oz at Bedford High School.
Oh.
And she played Dorothy.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes.
I'm going to have to talk to her. I didn't know that. She was the lead.
I wanted to call her a child. She's a grown woman.
Yes.
But she's just a phenomenal talent. Mm-hmm. She's a beautiful person. Mm-hmm. I love her to life. Mm-hmm. And so I hope she's around for the second.
Me too. I mean, she's gorgeous inside and out, and she brings such a grounded presence to the cast, and like this earthy feeling, like she is nature. So I mean, the entire cast is great. You know, Kimmy is just, I love Kimmy. So I'm glad you told me that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I guess I'm kind of like the proud papa, even though I'm not her real father. Mm-hmm. You know, there are times in my life when I really felt like I've been there for a reason, mm-hmm. and I continue to be there, and I will always be there for her. So kudos to her, and kudos to you for including her in this production. Yes. Mm-hmm. We've talked about the diversity of the cast, but you mentioned that there were 3 main characters, and I was hoping that you could disclose what some of the scenes were, because we really didn't get the benefit of the scene changes and all of that happens on a much larger scale, and we didn't have a program to give us context for some of the things that we were seeing. So what I'd like for you to do is just talk about some of those scenes and their relevance.
Well, the lead character is a new character that I'm developing. Right now, her name is The Journey, but that's probably going to change. And that's Deshonda Ash, who plays that character. And basically, she comes to this sacred place, and she asks the ancestors to show her what it's all for, you know, the things that she goes through, the burdens, but also the joys and the triumphs, because throughout the play, I want to make sure that I include those moments, the fun moments that we have, because it's not all just, you know, moments of depression and, you know, things like that. So The Journey is the lead, and then I would say Asada Shakur, Angela Davis, and Elaine Brown are the secondary characters. And so Angela Davis, what I wanted to do when I told their stories, because they are such giants, and sometimes it's hard to humanize icons, you know. So I wanted to highlight some of the most prominent, the most prominent moments in their lives that we know that are projected out into the world that make them icons. So Angela Davis was, of course, you know, arrested because she was her gun was involved in the Marin County shootout back in the 70s. And so I wanted to include that story. But also in that story, I include her relationship with George Jackson, whose brother, Jonathan Jackson, was her bodyguard. And he's the one who got a hold of her guns. She doesn't really talk about it, you know, like she doesn't really say if she gave it to him or if he stole it or what. She doesn't really talk about that. And because, you know, the guns were registered to her, she had to go to prison. And she was facing capital punishment because a judge was murdered and a police officer was murdered. But I also wanted to highlight the fact that during her time in prison, you know, she was madly in love with this guy, George Jackson, who was a Soledad brother, who was also in prison. And they met once in person and they exchanged letters to each other. So there's a scene in the play where she's talking about, and that is a real letter that he sent her. Well, a montage of different letters that he sent her. So I wanted to make sure that we put moments in there that wasn't just them being these hard, you know, iconic women who stand up strong and, you know, and tall, but also women who do fall in love and do take the risk of allowing yourself to fall in love. And then Assata Shakur, the Jersey Turnpike incident where she was pulled over at the Jersey Turnpike, and one of her friends in the Black Liberation Movement, because at that time she had left the Black Panther Party. They were pulled over on the Jersey Turnpike, and one of her friends ended up murdered, Sundiata, and then another one of her friends ran, but he was later, or actually Zaid was murdered and Sundiata ran, but they caught him later. So I want to talk about that, but also incorporate the fact that she had a daughter and how she conceived her daughter in prison. And she also gave birth to her daughter in prison. And she also had to escape and go to Cuba, leaving her daughter behind at the age of 6 years old. So all of that to me is like the courage and the courage it must have taken to leave your child behind and to go on to another country so that you could survive. And I mean, the FBI were following her daughter and all of these things because they wanted to try to catch Assata because that is her daughter, you know. And then Elaine Brown, who was the only woman, the first and only woman to lead the entire Black Panther Party after Huey P. Newton was sent into exile in 1974. We talk about the moment, you know, when she goes up in front of everyone, and that's a real part of her speech that she made. I have all the guns and the money I can withstand without or within, you know, all of that is real. And also her turbulent relationship with Huey, you know, and how he like 2 weeks before he asked her, she was going to leave because he beat her, he slapped her, and how she stayed because she loved this man and she loved this party and she believed in this party so much that it was at the detriment of herself. And she also had a daughter too. So yeah, it was just about taking those stories and making these women human, you know, but also doing it in a way that appealed to my individual aesthetic, you know. So it is an abstract play, you know. We're working in this world that is not really realism, you know. It's abstract, and there's all these different types of theater happening, you know. There's meta, you know, there's realism, and then there's poetry and monologue. So and then there's like abstract movement happening. So I really wanted to find a way to incorporate their story so that I could elevate it a little bit to make it more interesting. And also that's just my aesthetic. I'm very into movement and combining different types of theaters together to dismantle the traditional white European way of creating theater. And I can definitely say Ntozake Shange, Adrienne Kennedy, Sonia Sanchez, Nikki Giovanni, all those people, Maya Angelou, Toni Morrison, James Baldwin, all of those people have contributed to this work and the style in so many ways because I read a lot of all of them. So, yeah.
I could definitely see some of those influences in what you did, and I'm really appreciative of the context that you just gave because one thing that I see is that it enabled you to retell history in a way that does justice to its truth. You know, years ago I read a book called The Briar Patch by Murray Kempton, and it was his description of COINTELPRO and how it infiltrated the Black Panther Party and basically brought about its demise, you know. So I think these are things that people really need to know, because they're whitewashing history right now in a way that takes away their guilt, shame, or responsibility for certain things that they did, you know. So when we think about black nationalism, and I kind of saw you kind of grimace when you brought up the term black nationalism.
The KKK are nationalists. They're nationalists, but they're not called nationalists.
Right. But the whole idea of nationalism is for black people to have a sense of belonging to something that represents them. And what has happened in this country is that we've been told that we have to fit into something that does not accept us. And as a result, we keep coming back and saying, hey, but what about our rights? What about our equality? What about pay? What about compensation? What about reparations? And all those things get neglected. And part of the reason that they get neglected is because we don't have a nation. The truth of the matter is that we are a nation within a nation, but we are a nation within a nation that is not organized and it is not operating in any real way that contributes to our overall success.
I agree.
So
yes, the FBI. The FBI. I mean, they murdered Fred Hampton. You know, you know, the Black Panthers. Internally, there were some things that were going on. You know, there was misogyny. You know, there was drug uses and nepotism and things like that. But definitely the FBI, like when Eldridge Cleaver went off to Algeria, you know, there was him and the FBI sent letters to Eldridge Cleaver posing like they were from Huey P. Newton. So eventually that divided the Black Panther Party because I forgot which one of them was in support of the Panther 21 and one of them weren't. And so what happened was they ended up, you know, dividing the Black Panther Party and the Black Liberation Party. So they did their job, and they also had informants, you know, which led to the murder of Fred Hampton, who is definitely like my favorite Panther man. I'm doing research on him now. That's probably what my next piece is going to be about. Fred Hampton, a one-man show.
Yeah, I think it's also important to point out the fact that this is subject matter that is seeing kind of a resurgence or resurrection. I mean, we just had the film Judas and the Black Messiah, which you know directly connects to that story. But I think the beauty in what you did is that you showed the feminine aspect of this movement, you know, because when we think about the Black Panther Party, we always thinking about the dudes standing out on the sidewalk with the guns and all of that, you know. But the truth of the matter is, which is what I wrote about, and that is the fact that women were largely responsible for the successes of the party because they were the ones that were doing the work, you know.
They were.
Yeah. So, and I think that needs to be known because, you know, same there you have within the Black church who's doing the heavy lifting. The sisters are doing the heavy lifting, you know. So it was beautiful to see, you know, women being given their due in the way that you did it, but you did it in a way that wasn't disrespectful to men. You didn't put men down to lift Black women up. I really, really appreciated that.
Yeah, because it's not about Black men, you know. So, and that's crazy because in other iterations there were mention of Huey P. Newton, Eldridge Cleaver, and I do mention Little Bobby Hutton, but only because he was murdered by the cops, you know, with his hands up. But they were, and then I'm like, no, like I can't make this about them. This is about these women. And not just their femininity, you know. I think because I feel like I am a person who I'm a woman, but I'm not very feminine. You know what I mean? I do have masculine energy and masculine tendencies, so it wasn't even about me trying to display their femininity either, or putting women into a box. It was more of just humanizing Black women, you know, like as simple as that, you know. And if femininity is what came out of it, then that's what, you know, because different people, when they see it, they're going to get different things out of it. So Yeah.
We're going to pause right there and come back. You're listening to Open Door with Vince Robinson on 95.9 FM WOVU. My guest is India Nicole Burton. We'll be right back.
Attention Shaker Heights residents. The United States Postal Service is bringing a mobile unit every Monday and Thursday from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. at 2855 East 130th Street in Cleveland. This mobile unit will offer services including stamps, package mailing, and money orders in place of the Shaker Finance Station, which is closed through October while enhancing security. P.O. Box customers should continue to pick up their mail at the Shaker Main Post Office at 3675 Warrensville Center Road, Mondays through Fridays from 8:30 a.m. until 5:30 p.m. and Saturdays from 9 a.m. until 2 p.m. The lobby will remain open for 24 hours a day. Once again, the United States Postal Service will use a mobile unit for Shaker Heights residents every Monday and Thursday from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. at 2855 East 130th Street in Cleveland through October. This is brought to you by the United States Postal Service and WOVU 95.9 FM. Our Voices United, a Burton Bell Carr community radio station.
We're back on Open Door with Vince Robinson and my guest, India Nicole Burton. She is the author and the director of Panther Women. It has seen its day, but it's coming back, and we're really happy to see it come back. And as I said before, I'm hoping that some of the folks who are in this version of it will be around for the second version of it. In the previous segment, we were talking about certain realities of the Black Panther Party, and we were talking a little bit about black nationalism. You've done quite a bit of research, quite a bit of investigation as to what happened back then so that you could bring it to life right now. What are the most important things you feel that you've learned about the Black Panther Party and the movement from back then that we can learn from to be of benefit to us today?
That if we can't organize, we can't organize, and we can come together, and also we can filter our black money into each other. You know what I mean? I think that was something that was happening like in the 60s and stuff like that, that started to kind of dismantle with, with crack cocaine and all of that, and with Reaganomics when people were given credit cards and stuff. Is that what it did was it took from us filtering money back into ourselves. And the Black Panther Party were really into communism, and I mentioned that Sun Tzu and the Vietnamese women and all of that, because it was so community oriented. When Fred Hampton died, he died in a home where there were about 12 people who lived in this home. None of them worked, but what happened was they used the money that when they sold newspapers and stuff, they would use that money to pay for the rent, to buy the food. The women would watch the kids. Sometimes the men would cook. So they really organized in this community. And I'm not saying that I necessarily believe that, all black people should become communists. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is that we have power. We have power, and the only thing that we have to do is not self-destruct. And that is really hard. That's really hard because of toxic male masculinity or insecurities or greed for money and greed for power. And that's essentially what also helped the demise of the Black Panther Party, is just all this greed and misogyny and stuff like that.
Well, again, when we go back to one of the reasons that it became disineffective, it's because you did have operatives.
Yep.
What I learned from the Briar Patch was that there were black men who would work for the FBI.
Yep.
And then they would go into a chapter and they would instigate an act of violence or destruction, and then that chapter would get blamed for it, even though it wasn't an internal decision. It was an external decision that came as a result of an operative being involved. You also mentioned a certain relationship to communism, and I just want to put that into a specific context, because communism in a general sense, not a specific sense, but communism in a general sense is connected to African principles of community.
I can agree with that.
If you just look at the first letters of the word, within communism is the idea of community.
Yep.
It's the idea of the village. It's the idea of everybody contributing. And when you look at the Nguzo Saba, which are right there on the wall there, you've got cooperative economics, collective work and responsibility. These are things that African people have always been about. You know, in the village, it's not about one person going without. It's about everybody getting the benefit of the resources and wealth that exists within that paradigm. So I don't necessarily look at communism being a bad word. I look at it as a bad word because of the context that it has been given in America. You know, the same thing with socialism. You know, we kind of demonize socialism, but at the very same time, you got socialism in play in America. When they give out these handouts to corporations, that's socialism. But the problem with that is that the business is getting the benefit and the everyday person is not. And the everyday person is sitting there saying, oh, socialism is a bad thing.
Yep.
But I guarantee you that most of the people that got those stimulus checks within the past year, they went straight to the bank with them bad boys. And they didn't say, oh, this is socialism, I can't take this money. But that's what it was. So anyway, I don't want to give black nationalism a bad name. I guess maybe it's because, you know, I'm a Pan-Africanist.
Yeah, I just don't like it because the white people did call the Black Panthers nationalists, and they use it in a negative, derogatory way.
Right.
You know, so it's very hard for me to use language that white people used to demonize and to discredit an organization that started off, you know, really to help patrol neighborhoods and make sure that the police officers weren't, you know, brutally beating black men in the street, you know, and so that's the reason why I hate, you know, I don't want to say hate, but I don't like to use the word nationalist, especially when it comes to the Black Panther Party, because it was used so negative.
Yeah, I get that. And I think, you know, partly because of the definition that they gave it, you know, but I know that there are even those of us within our own community, because we have been so affected by the brainwash that we've been given through media, through education and indoctrination, that we would take a dim view of the need for us to be a nation.
Yeah.
You know, so, you know, oh, man, don't talk that black stuff to me, and I ain't no African, and all that other kind of stuff. And so the question I would ask is, well, who are you? What are you? And what are you supposed to be doing? And if you can't answer those three questions, then there's really no need for us to have a conversation, because you really don't have anything to say, because you're not living in your purpose. So let's shift gears and just talk about India, the playwright. Something happened within you that said, I can make a difference if I do this. How did that happen for you?
I think just a strong need to want to understand myself a little bit more, because of the things that happened to me as a child, the things that I had to go through as a child. I was just always filled with so much rage, and it was really starting to, because I'm also diabetic, but it was starting to affect me physically, my health, and also affect the people that I was closest to and the people that I loved, and I just couldn't have that. You know, if it was just affecting me, you know, that's another thing that I can deal with on my own. But when I saw the people around me suffering because of my rage and my own undealt with trauma, I knew that I needed to go on a journey to try to figure myself out. Like I said, I was around a lot of white people who, because I could navigate in circles and things like that, and I could sort of speak their language, and they did like me for whatever reason, I was accepted, you know, in a way. So I needed to find a way to figure myself out. And one of those ways has always been theater. Theater is one of the most powerful things on earth to me, because as a writer, you can go in and you can create your own worlds. As an actor, you can go in and analyze a character and figure out and find some things within this character that relates to you or does not relate to you, or you don't want to relate to, or things that you see in yourself. So it was just a strong need to figure myself out and to be more happier. And I knew that if I could go on this journey, that I could touch a lot of Black women. And also Panther Women, it has to be directed by a Black woman. It has to be all Black women cast, of course. It has to be a Black female director. It has to be an all women of color production team. So it also became a movement. So now in these spaces where all of us are operating, we feel safe to talk about some of the things that are only familiar to us. So it's been, and a lot of women say, like, it's been a really a journey of healing and understanding myself more. So that's why that's where it started, was me needing to understand myself more.
Mm-hmm. And you also mentioned Dr. Mary Weems when we were initially talking about this play. Could you talk about how she has influenced you and what you do?
Dr. Mary Weems is just a woman who oozes truth and authenticity and honesty out of her pores. There is nothing fake about that woman. So, in her work, like you said earlier, like, it's her voice. She's not faking. She's talking in the Black woman's tongue, because she can't be anything other than a Black woman, because she's a Black woman in her experience. So what I've learned from Mary is to live in my truth and to not, to be honest and to put honesty onto paper, onto page, and not be afraid to do that. You know what I mean? Because a lot of times, a lot of African American people in general, women, men, when they write, they want to get produced, so they write to pander towards white audiences. Mary does not do that. Like, that's not something she does. Her work is very, very rooted in her culture, the culture that she grew up in. And I like to think that my work is rooted in that too. So yes, Mary, and one of the first plays that I was in when I came to Cleveland, was a play that she wrote, in a play that Michael Oatman, who's a good friend of mine, directed. I don't know if you know Michael Oatman.
I know Michael.
Yeah, and then I just directed one of her pieces. It was a stage reading, and I just love Mary. She's authentic. If authenticity was a person, it would be Mary. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you mentioned Toni Morrison as well, who was unapologetic about writing about Black people.
Yes.
So.
Yeah, I mean, Toni. The thing that I love about Toni's work is it's always working on some level of magical realism. So you read Paradise, you think, all this stuff is happening in its realism. And then at the end, boom, I'm not going to tell what happens in Paradise, but something magical happens. You're watching Beloved, and Beloved comes back from the dead. It's just like, this woman is just incredibly talented in being able to surprise people, but also being able to write about the Black lives like we matter, and also not humanizing Black people and saying, look, Black people are good, Black people are bad, Black people are everything that any other race can be. You know what I mean? And we're not that, because we're human, and that's what I love about The Bluest Eye, the character Charlie, and Picot, like, she's everything to me. And I have, some of her quotes tattooed on me, her and Maya Angelou. Okay. Yeah. So.
Yes. Mm-hmm. I've been blessed in my life to see Toni Morrison in person on a couple of different occasions. Mm-hmm. I share a birthday with Maya Angelou.
Oh yeah, April
4th.
My birthday's April 3rd.
Yeah, I noticed that. That's right. That's why your passion comes through for me.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I want to talk to you about the state of Black culture and theater arts in Cleveland when we come back. There's a lot to say about that. I'm sure you have a few thoughts, and we can talk about the art scene in general, but I think we must dedicate some conversation because folks need to know. So we're going to dive into that when we come back.
Okay.
You're listening to Open Door with Vince Robinson and my guest, India Nicole Burton, right here on 95.9 FM WOVU, a Burton Bell Carr community radio station.
WOVU listeners, did you know you can call us during any live show? Did you know you can ask questions or give your comments live on the air? If you didn't know, now you know. Call the WOVU request line at 216-271-0959. Your voice is our request. No one says it like you. You're better than the rest. Call us 216-271-0959. Questions, comments, complaints. We want all that and the kitchen sink. This is WOVU. Our voices united. We can't do it without you. Call on through.
Hi, this is Deborah Dahlman from the Legal Aid Society of Cleveland, and you're listening to WOVU 95.9 FM.
This is Vince Robinson inviting you to visit Cleveland's Museum of Contemporary Art to witness a solo exhibition by my artist friend and guest of Open Door, Aaron Williams. It's called Awful Aaron and opens this Friday at Mocha from 6 to 11 p.m. Visit mochacleveland.org for more. Now, back to Open Door with Vince Robinson. Welcome back to Open Door with Vince Robinson and my guest, playwright, director, and overall great person, India Nicole Burton. We've been talking about this fantastic play that she's written, and I wanted to use that as a segue into talking about the state of theater arts here in Cleveland. Right now, we're living in what some are considering post-pandemic. I don't think it's quite over yet, but we're given the illusion that perhaps things have changed. But one thing we do know is that for the past year and 3 or 4, maybe 5 months, we've been kind of in a state of flux. We have not been able to entertain audiences in spaces like theaters where actors and actresses do what they do. The performances that you've been having have been outdoor performances, and perhaps it was strategic in giving people a certain comfort level and being able to observe a performance and not being in an enclosed space.
Right.
But that also resulted in a lot of people not being able to do what they do. Obviously, you've been having rehearsals and doing what you needed to do to get this play out there. But I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts based on what has happened and where things can go with the theater art specifically in Cleveland. We've got places like the East Cleveland Public Theater. We've got places like Playwrights Local.
Caramel House.
Caramel House. You've had plays that have been done at the Shore Center through Terrence Spivey, a great friend of mine.
Yes, I love Terrence.
Yeah.
I've worked with him
it's a very
times.
small community. So
yeah, it is.
Just curious about, what's your thoughts about the current state of black theater?
Well, what has been happening what happened over the pandemic is that in the American theater, at a macrocosm level, is that a lot of theaters have been trying to diversify the work that they produce, and they've been trying to diversify the individual staff within the organization, and also dismantling white supremacy. So a lot of predominantly white theaters have released statements of racial, inclusivity and diversity. So I think it's a good thing, but I also hope that it's not a fad. I hope that it's not just something that people are jumping on the bandwagon. And my heart of hearts wants to believe that it's actually something that we're going to hold on to. Cleveland black arts. This is why I was afraid years ago when the Caramel was at threat of shutting down, because Caramel is the heart of black theater in Cleveland. Because of its history. It's the oldest African-American theater in the history of the country. So right now, I think we're in a good place. We have more African-American playwrights that I'm seeing pop up in Cleveland, we have a lot of African American talent. I mean, we just have a lot of African American talent that just needs to be incubated, and they need a place to go to work. I mean, Caramoo does, black theater, but they can't cast everyone. You know what I mean? So, now you see more theaters like Dobama, doing, I love Nathan Motto over at Dobama. They're doing some work, African-American work, and Ensemble, with Celeste is doing some work with African-Americans. Cleveland Public Theater has always, really been a theater that, has championed diversity. So, I think we're in a good state. If we continue on this road of theaters not allowing or letting us, Black African Americans, into their space, but giving us their space, and even in some case, stepping down leadership and giving that leadership to African American individuals so that we can transform the theaters, in a way. So I think we're in a good space right now, but who knows, next year we could be in a completely different place,
So you mentioned diversity and you mentioned inclusion, for a period of time, it was always just those two things, but then within the past couple of years, they've put equity into this conversation. Now, folks may not fully be aware of what equity means, but at least from my perspective, equity means that you have a voice in decisions that are made. You share the power that you have in a position of power, so it's nice that they talk about diversity. It's nice that they talk about inclusion in some ways. In other ways, it's not good. I'm reminded of, and I've told this story before and I'll tell it again, a major university wanted to change its rites of passage program that related specifically to African Americans to be inclusive of Native Americans, Latinos, and other groups. But the African rites of passage is the African rites of passage.
Exactly.
So if you alter it, then you take away from its power. So it's good to have these ideas of diversity and inclusion, but they have to be applied properly. And when you talk about equity, then you have to be willing to share the power that you've kept such a tight grip on for so long. So are you seeing any changes in terms of the equity part of this equation?
I am seeing that. Now, whether these theaters are just jumping on a bandwagon or, just saying, you know what I mean? Like we have to do this, otherwise we're going to get flack because we're not doing it. I don't know that, because the theater that I work at that theater, and I know what's happening in that theater, and that's, you know what I mean? We mean business, and we really are putting foot to pavement and walking the walk just as much as we're preaching. You know what I mean? So I can say at Cleveland Public Theater that is happening. That there is equity. Myself, I will be remiss to say that I'm not on senior staff, but I am given a lot of power, just to be able to say, I'm doing this piece and all the people in this piece got to be Black women or y'all can't produce it. And that happening. And also just Raymond trusting me. Like, he gave me a lot of trust. Raymond, I'd say, Raymond, you can come to rehearsal. He's like, I'll come to a rehearsal if you want me to, but I trust you. And just giving me that trust gave me confidence that I could do it. And then everyone, all the staff members, everybody is just dedicated to equity, inclusion, and diversity. If you go on our webpage, we have a diverse staff, and that is something that that is actively happening. It's not just because, we're trying to jump on a bandwagon. It's something that, we want to do because, we hire the people who are good for the job, but there are other people who are good for the jobs. There was some language in one of our fellowships that said you had to have gone to college to get this fellowship. And I'm like, well, this right here is, it's exclusive. We don't have that access. You know what I mean? And I know some people who never went to school for theater who can do things that I cannot even do. Yeah. So, and then Raymond's like, yeah, we got to take that out. You know what I mean? And so being able to sit in an environment and being able to say that to the guy at the top, and him saying to me, I hear you. All the time he doesn't agree with me, but that's okay. I'm not always right, though I like to believe that, most of the time I'm right. I'm not always right. And I also feel very challenged, which is something that is great. I'm challenged in my work. I'm pushed in my work. And I'm very lucky to be working at Cleveland Public Theater, especially at this time. Before me, I can't speak for anybody who worked there before, but I know right now, in this moment, I am really lucky to be at that institution.
Okay. So. One of the challenges that we face as artists in this community is one of organization. Mm-hmm. I participated in an effort to make some improvements within arts and culture in Cleveland, and we identified a lot of deficits. And one thing that we also identified is the fact that we seem to be so siloed as artists, and then when it comes to the whole idea of opportunities, we keep the opportunities close to the vest. Mm-hmm. Because if we share or we overshare, then we might miss out. So mm-hmm. then word doesn't get out, and then people find out about things at the last minute. I'm just wondering, from where you sit, what kinds of things you think can be done to improve the plight of actors and actresses or theater folk and artists in general in our community?
I think I can say what I'm doing, I think it starts with the youth. I was a teacher for 5 years at Dyke School of the Arts. It's it is the only middle school in the Cleveland public schools. That's an art school. And what I did was I made sure that all the work that we did taught them about their history. So, and I also gave them a lot of responsibility, So what that does is it automatically puts them in roles of leadership at a very young age, and making decisions, having to make decisions on their own. And those of us who do have the knowledge, I don't want to say the education, because when I say theater education, it sounds very white, European, and academic, but that's not what I mean. If I am in a position right now at Cleveland Public Theater that I am in, I am bringing all of my sisters with me. You know what I'm saying? So now I have, which Panther Women has went through 3 cycles. So there's over 30 women who have been employed and who have been a part of this process. So now we all have a network. So it's about creating, networking, and also being willing to share. We got to share. I know like you want to keep it to yourself, but that is not generating any kind of generational wealth. When it comes to the arts or anything else, is not sharing what you have. I will be remiss not to. My assistant director is a young African-American woman, and I make sure, and she's the one who's responsible for all of the scarves. So I put her in charge of making sure that in every scene, the scarves were used for a reason. And she did a fabulous job. But when we work together, I'm teaching. I'm teaching her, this is what happens. And that's what you got to do. You got to give back.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that in and of itself gives me hope, because I tell these stories and I have others tell their stories just so that the world gets a better view of what's really happening. Mm-hmm. Because we always sit and complain, we don't do this, we don't do that, mm-hmm. we're not doing this, we're mm-hmm. not doing that. But then I look at situations that are happening, mm-hmm. And we can't let these things happen in a vacuum. We have to let this out so that we can change the narrative, so that we can change that perspective. So I just want to give credit where credit is due. I think you created a brilliant thing with this play.
Thank you so much.
And I'm looking forward to what comes next beyond this play, because I know that there's fire burning in you.
There is.
And it's going to burn some stuff up in the process.
I hope it does.
But it's going to shine a light on things that need to be seen, and that's the purpose for light.
Yeah.
So with thank you for joining me on Open Door, and much success, continued success to you.
Thank you so much.
All right. And thank you for tuning in. You've been listening to Open Door with Vince Robinson right here on 95.9 FM WOVU. Know yourself, love yourself, be yourself, and make today your best day. Peace.